The day my wife left me, she cried harder than I did. That's the part nobody believes when I tell this story. It happened on a humid August evening outside Charlotte, North Carolina. I had just come home from a 12-hour shift installing roofing panels in 98-degree heat. My knees hurt. My back hurt. Hell, even my fingerprints felt tired. And sitting in my driveway was a black Mercedes-Benz worth more than my yearly salary. I already knew. Before I even walked inside the house, I knew. My wife Vanessa stood in the kitchen beside two packed suitcases while a man in an expensive gray suit waited awkwardly near the front door pretending not to look uncomfortable. His name was Richard Mercer, 52 years old, real estate investor, millionaire, country club member, the kind of guy who smiled like life had never told him no once. Vanessa's eyes immediately filled with tears the second she saw me. Ethan, I dropped my tool belt onto the floor slowly. For a few seconds, nobody spoke. Then Richard cleared his throat. I can leave you two alone. You should leave permanently, I replied. Vanessa closed her eyes instantly. Please don't do this. That sentence almost made me laugh. Like I was the one ruining everybody's evening. I stared at the suitcases. You're actually leaving. Her voice cracked immediately. I didn't mean for this to happen. There it was. The universal slogan of betrayal. I looked at Richard. You sleep with married women often? He stayed surprisingly calm. I care about her. I nodded slowly. I'm sure your money helps. Vanessa flinched hard at that. Good. Maybe shame still existed somewhere inside her. We didn't plan this, she whispered. I rubbed both hands over my face, exhausted beyond anger. You know the crazy part? I muttered quietly. I spent years terrified I wasn't making enough money for you. That's not why. Then why's there a Mercedes in my driveway? Silence. That silence answered everything. Vanessa started crying harder. I still love you. I actually laughed out loud. Then you got a funny way of showing it. The worst part? Part of me already saw this coming months earlier. The late-night texts. Her suddenly caring about designer clothes. The way she talked about wanting more out of life while staring at rich neighborhoods online. Meanwhile, I worked overtime every weekend trying to keep our mortgage paid after inflation wrecked everything. I thought sacrifice proved love. Turns out sacrifice just made me absent. Richard quietly grabbed Vanessa's suitcase. That simple little gesture nearly broke me. Because it looked practiced, comfortable, intimate. Like he'd already started playing husband before she officially left. Vanessa stepped toward me slowly. I'm sorry. I stared at the woman I spent 13 years loving. The woman who used to dance barefoot with me in our tiny apartment when we were broke and happy. And suddenly all I could think was, when did money become more important than us? Then came the sentence that truly destroyed me. You deserve somebody who can give you the life you want, she whispered. I frowned. What? Tears streamed down her face. You shouldn't have to work yourself into the ground forever. For one terrifying second, I realized she thought she was helping me by leaving. That somehow made it worse. Richard opened the front door quietly. Vanessa hesitated one final moment before walking out. And just like that, my wife climbed into another man's Mercedes while I stood alone in the doorway, still wearing my dirty roofing boots. The taillights disappeared down the street slowly. And for the first time in 13 years, my house felt completely empty. The silence after Vanessa left felt violent. Not peaceful, not calm, violent. I stood in the kitchen for almost 20 minutes staring at the empty spot where her purse usually sat. Half her coffee mug collection was gone. The hallway closet looked hollow without her jackets. Tiny things. That's what destroys you after somebody leaves. Not the screaming, not the betrayal, the little absences. I barely slept that night. Around 3 in the morning, I wandered into our bedroom and opened her side of the closet out of pure habit. Half empty. The sight physically hurt. I sat down on the floor surrounded by hangers while memories hit me one after another like punches to the ribs. Our honeymoon in Myrtle Beach. Painting this bedroom together when we bought the house. The night she cried because we couldn't afford fertility treatments after our second miscarriage. We survived all of that. And somehow lost to a man with a Mercedes and expensive watches. I laughed bitterly to myself. America really does turn everything into a competition eventually. The next morning, my younger brother Caleb showed up with beer and breakfast sandwiches after hearing what happened from my neighbor. Apparently, small-town gossip travels faster than Wi-Fi. He walked inside carefully, like somebody entering a funeral home. You okay? I looked around the empty kitchen. What do you think? Caleb sighed heavily. She really left? Yep. With the millionaire? I nodded once. He shook his head slowly in disbelief. Man, that one word carried enough pity to make me want to throw him out. Instead, I grabbed a beer at 11 in the morning because apparently rules no longer mattered. Caleb sat across from me quietly. You think she'll come back? I laughed immediately. No chance. Truthfully, that thought terrified me. Not because I wanted her back, because part of me still did. That was the humiliating part. Even after betrayal, love doesn't shut off cleanly like a light switch. Around noon, my phone buzzed. Vanessa. My chest tightened instantly before I even answered. What? Silence for a second. Then softly. Did you eat? I stared at the phone in disbelief. You leave me for a millionaire, and now you're checking if I had lunch? I'm serious. So am I. Her breathing sounded shaky. I know you hate me. I don't hate you. That surprised both of us. Because it was true. I was devastated. Humiliated. Angry. But hate? No. I just don't understand you anymore. I admitted quietly. Vanessa started crying again. I didn't leave because you weren't enough. Really? Sure feels that way. It wasn't about money. Then why's he rich? Silence. That silence again. Finally, she whispered. Because he made life feel easier. That sentence sat heavy in my chest long after the call ended. Easier. Not better. Not deeper. Easier. And honestly, I understood that more than I wanted to admit. Working construction 6 days a week destroys parts of you slowly. By the end of most nights, I barely had energy to hold conversations anymore. Vanessa spent years eating dinner alone while I chased overtime, trying to build us stability. Meanwhile, Richard showed up with vacations, wine tastings, rooftop restaurants, and freedom from stress. Fantasy always looks beautiful from far away. 3 weeks later, I saw them together for the first time since she left. Worst experience of my life. I was leaving Home Depot carrying roofing supplies when I spotted Vanessa climbing out of Richard's Mercedes wearing sunglasses and a white dress I'd never seen before. She looked different, expensive, like somebody trying hard to belong in a world that still felt unfamiliar. Then she saw me, and immediately her entire face changed. Guilt. Richard noticed me too. He actually smiled and waved politely. That nearly sent me into cardiac arrest. Vanessa walked toward me slowly. Ethan. I stepped backward immediately. Don't. Her eyes watered instantly. I miss you. I stared at her in disbelief. You're literally standing beside a millionaire. Tears rolled down her cheeks. And then she whispered something that genuinely confused me. I've never felt lonelier in my life. I couldn't stop thinking about what Vanessa said outside Home Depot. I've never felt lonelier in my life. That sentence haunted me for days. Because it didn't sound fake. It sounded exhausted. But I refused to let myself care. She made her choice. That became my mantra every morning. She made her choice. Still, somewhere deep down, part of me kept imagining her laughing beside Richard in luxury restaurants while I climbed rooftops in 100-degree heat, trying not to destroy my knees before 50. Then came the country club incident. That one changed everything. About a month after she left, my company got hired for emergency repairs at one of the wealthiest golf clubs outside Charlotte. Naturally, fate decided to humiliate me personally. Around noon, I carried equipment across the pool area when I heard familiar laughter nearby. Vanessa. I looked up instinctively, and there she was sitting beside Richard under a white umbrella surrounded by rich people drinking cocktails and pretending life was effortless. But something looked off immediately. Vanessa smiled too much. The kind of smile people force when they're trying desperately to fit in. One of the women at the table laughed loudly while looking directly at Vanessa's purse. Cute bag, she said. Vintage. The table chuckled softly. My stomach tightened. Even from 30 feet away, I could tell exactly what was happening. They were mocking her. Not openly. Rich people rarely do things openly. They just make you feel poor without technically saying it. Vanessa laughed awkwardly and touched Richard's arm like she needed rescuing. And Richard? He barely noticed. He was too busy talking business with another millionaire at the table. For the first time since she left. I didn't feel jealous. I felt sad for her. Later that afternoon, I walked into the clubhouse carrying tools and nearly collided with Vanessa near the hallway bathrooms. She looked startled, then embarrassed. Ethan. I glanced toward the patio outside. Looks fun. She crossed her arms tightly. You don't know what you're talking about. No. I shrugged. Seems like rich people paradise to me. Her eyes filled instantly. You think money fixes loneliness? I stared at her. You left me for a guy worth $20 million. I left because I was drowning. That answer echoed sharply through the empty hallway. Vanessa lowered her voice immediately after. You stopped living, Ethan. I was working. You were disappearing. The sadness in her face looked painfully real now. Not manipulative. Not fake. Just broken. I rubbed my forehead tiredly. So this is what? Midlife crisis with champagne? That actually made her laugh once through tears. Then she quietly admitted something that completely stunned me. I don't belong here. I frowned. What? Vanessa looked toward the patio where laughter echoed through glass windows. These people talk about money like it's oxygen. Her voice cracked slightly. They make dinner reservations that cost more than our old mortgage payment. I stayed silent. Because honestly, part of me enjoyed hearing that. Not because I wanted her miserable. Because I wanted proof this fantasy life wasn't perfect. Vanessa wiped her cheeks quickly. They all look at me like I'm temporary. That sentence landed hard. Temporary. Not a partner. Not an equal. Just another beautiful woman Richard would eventually replace. You knew who he was, I said quietly. I thought he loved me. The second those words left her mouth, her face changed like she instantly realized what she admitted. Not loves. Loved. Past tense. My chest tightened despite myself. What happened? Vanessa laughed bitterly. You know how long rich men stay fascinated by damaged married women. She answered her own question immediately. Not long. I didn't know what to say to that. Part of me still wanted to hate her. Another part remembered every night she cried while I worked overtime. Every anniversary dinner I missed. Every moment our marriage slowly starved while I convinced myself sacrifice alone was enough. Vanessa looked directly into my eyes. He barely comes home anymore. I frowned immediately. What? He travels constantly. Her smile looked hollow now. Turns out millionaires are busy too. That irony hit hard enough that neither of us spoke for several seconds. Then quietly, almost embarrassed, Vanessa whispered, I think I made the biggest mistake of my life. At that exact moment, Richard appeared at the end of the hallway, and the second he saw us standing together, his expression darkened. Richard's face changed the second he saw us together. Not jealousy exactly. Possession. Like he suddenly remembered Vanessa used to belong to another life before him. He walked toward us slowly in an expensive navy blazer that probably cost more than my truck payment. Everything all right? He asked calmly. Vanessa stepped away from me immediately. That hurt more than I expected. Like she was afraid of being caught doing something wrong. I grabbed my toolbox. Just working. Richard studied both of us carefully, then smiled politely. Well, thank you for your hard work. God, I hated rich people sometimes. That calm, polished tone. That fake graciousness. Like money automatically made him emotionally superior. I brushed past him without another word. But before I reached the exit, Vanessa quietly said, Ethan, wait. I stopped. Against my better judgment, I stopped. She walked toward me slowly while Richard stayed behind near the hallway watching us with unreadable eyes. I need to talk to you. I laughed under my breath. About what? Not here. I looked toward Richard. That your boyfriend's rule? Vanessa flinched hard. He's not my boyfriend. I stared at her in disbelief. You left your husband for him. That doesn't mean you stopped being human overnight. That sentence followed me all week. 3 nights later, she called again around midnight. I almost ignored it. Almost. Hello. Her voice sounded shaky. Can you come get me? I sat upright immediately. What? I'm downtown. She sniffled quietly. Please. Every survival instinct inside me screamed not to go. But after 13 years together, reflexes don't disappear that easily. 20 minutes later, I pulled up outside one of Charlotte's luxury high-rise buildings. Vanessa stood alone near the entrance, hugging herself against the cold night air. No Mercedes. No Richard. Just my wife wearing heels she couldn't comfortably walk in anymore. The second she climbed into my truck, I smelled alcohol and expensive perfume. She looked exhausted. Mascara smeared. Emotionally wrecked. What happened? Vanessa stared out the window silently for several seconds before whispering. He told me I embarrass him. My hands tightened around the steering wheel. What? She laughed bitterly through tears. At dinner tonight. Her voice cracked. I said something wrong in front of his business partners. I frowned. What did you say? I asked if one of them still worked normal hours or if rich people just golf professionally. Despite everything, I almost smiled. Vanessa wiped tears from her cheeks angrily. They all laughed at me. I stayed quiet, then softly asked, What did Richard do? Her face collapsed completely. He apologized to them. That one hit hard. Not because I cared about Richard, because I knew exactly how humiliating that must have felt. Vanessa stared down at her hands. He said I needed to learn how to carry myself properly if I wanted this life. I looked at her in disbelief. That's insane. She laughed weakly. No. What's insane is that part of me still kept trying to impress him afterward. The truck fell silent except for highway noise. Finally, I asked the question buried in my chest. Why are you calling me? Vanessa looked over at me with tears in her eyes. Because you were the last person who ever made me feel enough exactly as I was. That sentence nearly destroyed me. Because suddenly I remembered all the small things I used to love about her. Her sarcasm. Her Walmart candle obsession. The way she sang terribly in the kitchen while cooking pasta. Somewhere along the way, both of us started confusing financial stress with lack of love. And Richard stepped perfectly into the emptiness. I pulled into a gas station parking lot and turned off the engine. So what now? Vanessa wiped her face quietly. I don't know. Are you leaving him? Silence. Then softly. I don't even think he notices whether I stay or go anymore. That answer said everything. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then suddenly Vanessa whispered something that made my stomach tighten instantly. He changed after I moved in. I frowned. What do you mean? Her voice turned small. Controlling. Every alarm bell in my head went off immediately. He checks my spending. Gets angry if I go out without telling him. He even complained about how often I talk to my own sister. I stared at her. That's not normal. No, she whispered. I'm starting to realize that. Then came this sentence I never expected to hear. I miss our old life. After that night in my truck, everything became complicated again. Before, it was simple. Vanessa betrayed me. Richard stole her. Marriage over. Painful, but clean. Now suddenly I was seeing pieces of the woman I used to love underneath all the designer clothes and exhaustion. And honestly, that scared me more than anger ever did. For the next 2 weeks, she called constantly. Sometimes crying. Sometimes just wanting to talk. Meanwhile, Richard apparently traveled nonstop between Miami, Dallas, and New York chasing deals, while Vanessa sat alone inside a luxury penthouse that felt more like a museum than a home. One night, she FaceTimed me accidentally while trying to call her sister. I answered before realizing. The penthouse behind her looked cold. Massive windows. White marble everywhere. Expensive. Empty. Vanessa looked embarrassed immediately. Sorry. Wrong button. I should have hung up. Instead, I asked, you okay? She hesitated too long. That answered enough already. Then quietly, he's angry I left dinner early tonight. I frowned. Why? Because I embarrassed him again. That phrase made my jaw tighten instantly. What did you do this time? Vanessa laughed bitterly. I corrected him. That's it. He doesn't like being corrected in public. Something about the way she said it unsettled me deeply. Not fear exactly. Conditioning. Like she'd already started adapting herself around his moods. 3 nights later, things got worse. A massive thunderstorm rolled through Charlotte around midnight while I sat at home watching baseball half asleep on the couch. Then somebody started pounding on my front door. Hard. I opened it expecting disaster. And there she was. Vanessa stood completely soaked in the rain, carrying one small suitcase while mascara streaked down her face. For a second, I honestly thought I was hallucinating. Vanessa? She started crying immediately. He threw my clothes outside. My stomach dropped. What? She hugged herself tightly, shaking from cold and humiliation. We fought. I pulled her inside instantly without thinking. What happened? Vanessa sat at the kitchen table, dripping rainwater onto the floor while I grabbed towels. At first, she couldn't even speak properly. Finally, she whispered. He said I was becoming a liability. Rage flashed through me immediately. A liability? He thinks I'm too emotional. She laughed weakly through tears. Too working class around his friends. Jesus Christ. I sat across from her trying to process what I was hearing. You left your marriage for this guy. I know. You thought he loved you. I know. And he threw your clothes into the rain? Vanessa nodded slowly, then quietly admitted the truth she'd been avoiding for months. I think he liked stealing me more than actually having me. That sentence sat heavy between us. Because deep down, I think both of us already knew it was true. Richard enjoyed the fantasy. The beautiful married woman choosing him over ordinary life. But fantasies fade once reality moves in. Vanessa stared around our kitchen silently. Same old cabinets. Same cheap table. Same tiny house she once thought she'd outgrown. Then tears filled her eyes again. You kept everything. I shrugged quietly. Didn't really feel like redecorating my depression. That actually made her laugh through tears. A real laugh. And hearing it again after all these months nearly destroyed me. Vanessa looked down at her wedding ring still sitting on her finger. I hadn't even noticed until then. You never took it off? She twisted it slowly. I couldn't. My chest tightened painfully. Outside, thunder rattled the windows while rain slammed against the roof. For several minutes, neither of us spoke. Then finally, Vanessa whispered the question both of us were terrified of. Do you think people can come back from ruining everything? I stared at the woman who shattered my heart sitting soaked at my kitchen table wearing another man's expensive coat. And honestly, I didn't know. Vanessa stayed the night. Not in our bedroom. On the couch. That detail mattered to both of us. Because despite everything, the cheating, the lies, the millionaire, the humiliation, neither of us was ready to pretend the damage didn't exist. The next morning, I found her asleep under an old blanket wearing one of my oversized Carolina Panthers hoodies. For one dangerous second, it felt normal again. Then reality came crashing back. This was the woman who left me for another man. And somehow now she was sleeping in my living room after getting thrown out of a penthouse. Life's weird like that. I made coffee quietly while rain still tapped against the windows outside. Vanessa woke up slowly. The second she realized where she was, shame washed across her face. I should go. Where? Silence. That answered enough. She looked completely drained now, without makeup or expensive clothes. Just tired. Human. Fragile. I handed her coffee. Did he hit you? Her head snapped up instantly. No. The speed of the answer sounded genuine. Thank God. But emotional damage leaves bruises too. Vanessa wrapped both hands around the mug. He just got colder and colder after I moved in. I stayed quiet. He liked showing me off at first, she continued softly. Then after a while, it started feeling like I was failing some audition every day. That sentence hit hard, because I remembered how insecure she always felt growing up poor in rural North Carolina. Richard's world probably magnified every fear she already carried inside herself. Vanessa laughed weakly. You know what's funny? What? I used to think rich people had easier relationships because money solved stress. And she looked around our tiny kitchen. I think lonely people are lonely everywhere. We sat in silence for a while. Then my phone buzzed. Richard. Both of us froze instantly. I answered carefully. What? His voice stayed calm. Is Vanessa there? I looked directly at her. Fear crossed her face immediately. Yeah. Silence for a second. Then, she left some things at the penthouse. I almost laughed. She's not coming back. Another pause. I figured. The lack of emotion in his voice irritated me instantly. That all you got to say? Richard sighed heavily. You think I'm the villain here. If the shoe fits. She knew who I was from the beginning. I looked at Vanessa again. She stared down at the table silently. Richard continued calmly. She wanted a different life. That sentence landed hard because part of it was true. Vanessa wasn't stolen. She chose. And that complicated everything. She also wanted someone who paid attention to her, Richard added quietly. I frowned. What's that supposed to mean? You worked constantly. His voice stayed frustratingly calm. She talked about being lonely all the time. Anger flashed through me immediately. So your solution was sleeping with a married woman? No, he replied. My solution was listening when her husband stopped. That shut me up. Because deep down, part of me feared he was right. Not about betraying me. About neglect. Richard's voice lowered slightly. For what it's worth, I did care about her. I glanced toward Vanessa. She looked emotionally exhausted hearing him say it. Then why throw her out? Silence. Finally, because reality is different than fantasy. The honesty in that answer unsettled me. No lies. No excuses. Just truth ugly enough to hurt everyone involved. After the call ended, Vanessa quietly whispered, He's right about one thing. I leaned against the counter. What? You stopped seeing me long before I left. That sentence hurt because it was true. Not entirely, but enough. I spent years thinking providing financially was the same thing as maintaining a marriage. Meanwhile, Vanessa slowly disappeared emotionally beside me while I chased overtime and stability. Neither of us noticed how lonely the other had become until somebody else stepped into the empty space. Vanessa wiped tears from her face. I hated myself every day after I left. I crossed my arms. Then why stay? Her answer came instantly. Because I was too ashamed to come back. God, that one nearly broke me. Because suddenly I realized something terrifying. The woman sitting in my kitchen wasn't the glamorous wife who left in a Mercedes. She was somebody who already knew she destroyed her own life months ago. Vanessa stayed with me for 3 weeks before the town started talking. Small southern towns survive on gossip the same way trucks survive on gasoline. By the second Sunday, my neighbor Carol had already accidentally asked if my wife was back home again while pretending to water flowers for 40 straight minutes. Vanessa noticed too. "You should probably ask me to leave," she said quietly one evening. We sat on the front porch watching summer heat lightning flash across distant Carolina skies. I looked over at her. "Do you want me to?" She didn't answer immediately. That silence said enough. Things between us had become strange. Careful. Some nights we laughed together again like old times. Other nights the betrayal sat between us so heavily we barely spoke at all. Trust doesn't magically reappear because somebody comes home crying. That's the part movies lie about. One Friday night, Vanessa found our old wedding photo while cleaning the hallway closet. I walked into the kitchen and saw her sitting at the table staring at it with tears rolling silently down her face. "We looked happy," she whispered. "We were." She nodded slowly. "Before life got hard." That sentence stuck with me. Because honestly, that was the truth. We weren't some toxic screaming couple before Richard appeared. We were exhausted, financially drowning, emotionally disconnected. Two people surviving so hard we forgot to protect the marriage itself. And loneliness is dangerous when somebody wealthy arrives promising escape. Vanessa looked up at me carefully. "Do you think you'll ever forgive me?" I answered honestly. "I don't know." She nodded like she expected that. Then softly, "I don't think I'll ever fully forgive myself either." 3 days later, Richard showed up at my house unexpectedly. Black Mercedes. Perfect haircut. Same expensive confidence. But something about him looked older suddenly. More tired. Vanessa froze when she saw him through the window. "What's he doing here?" "No idea." I stepped outside before things escalated. Richard stood near the driveway holding a small box. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Then he handed it toward me. "What's this?" "Her jewelry." I frowned slightly. "She left it behind." I looked inside the box. Bracelets. Designer earrings. A necklace worth more than my truck. Vanessa slowly walked outside behind me. The second Richard saw her, something changed in his expression. "Regret maybe." "You okay?" he asked quietly. Vanessa folded her arms tightly. "Why are you really here?" Richard looked between both of us. Then finally admitted the truth none of us wanted to say out loud. "Because I realized I wasn't in love with you." His voice stayed calm but tired. "I was in love with the idea of being chosen over someone else." The honesty hit like a brick. Vanessa's face crumbled instantly. Richard rubbed the back of his neck awkwardly. "I think you love the fantasy too." She looked away, crying softly. Because deep down, he wasn't completely wrong either. All three of us had spent months chasing fantasies. Richard wanted excitement. Vanessa wanted escape. And I wanted to believe hard work alone could hold a marriage together forever. Reality destroyed all three illusions. Richard looked at me next. "You know something?" I stayed silent. "She talked about you constantly." That sentence hit harder than expected. "Even when she was angry at you," he continued quietly. "It was always you." Vanessa covered her face, crying harder. For a long moment, nobody moved. Then Richard stepped backward toward the Mercedes. "I genuinely hope you two figure things out." And just like that, the millionaire drove away alone. No dramatic ending. No revenge. Just 3 damaged people left standing in the wreckage of bad decisions. 6 months later, Vanessa moved back into our bedroom. Slowly, carefully, like somebody rebuilding a burned house one brick at a time. Marriage counseling helped. Painfully at first. Then honestly, we learned things about each other we probably should have understood years earlier. Like how loneliness can exist even inside love. How exhaustion kills intimacy quietly. How resentment grows in silence. And most importantly, how forgiveness is not one moment. It's a decision you remake over and over again. Some nights were still hard. Some memories still hurt. But every Friday now, no matter how exhausted I am, I leave work early. Vanessa and I sit on the porch together watching Carolina sunsets with cheap beer and no phones allowed. And sometimes she still grabs my hand suddenly like she's afraid I might disappear someday. Truthfully, part of me already did. But maybe, the part that came back was better.